Right, welcome back to episode 7 of the Start with One web development series, where you're learning how to do web development literally from ground zero, from the first putting a page together all the way through adding JavaScript to your website and then putting it online. In this episode, we're going to cover block quotes. Now, we might use block quotes for any number of things on the web, but especially for things like testimonials or a pull-out quote or just a quote inside of maybe a book or something like that. So I could imagine you using it a lot. If you had a blog and you were writing HTML for your blog, you would use maybe a block quote to set it off from the rest of the text. So let's just start by going and sort of getting one of these cleaner paragraphs down here. I'm just going to copy it and come up here and paste it. It just doesn't have some of this formatting stuff that's here, so we can see it's just sort of a clean paragraph with none of the formatting. And to start the block quote, we just write it all as one word, block quote. And we also need, this is sort of like the P tag, where we need to have a closing tag. So we're just going to wrap this entire paragraph in a block quote. So let's just end it here, and then we'll save. And you can see now that our paragraph has some special styling. So there's margin on the right and the left of the paragraph, which helps to set it off from the rest of the text. So you could imagine that you had text going all the way down, and then you have this paragraph sort of stands out in this way. And we have one attribute that we can add to the block quote, and that's the cite attribute. Remember, with the A tag, we had the attribute of the H reference, which is the hyperlink reference. And so let's just copy that. And the cite attribute actually takes a URL. So if you were getting this quote from another person's website, or it was somewhere online that you were quoting someone, and you had the URL directly to that reference, you could put that here. And if we save, you won't notice any difference here. Nothing happened. So this is not for the user end. This is actually for the code end. And if someone were to look inside this code, they would be able to see this is where the reference is from. It helps the browser to know where this comes from. And if there's a screen reader, I believe that that will read aloud where this citation is being taken from. And another element that we have that we can use for block quotes especially is called the cite. So this is a cite tag. This is a cite attribute of the block quote tag. Okay, so these angle brackets represent a tag, HTML tags. So that's the appropriate terminology for it. So a cite is an opening and a closing tag, and then inside that, we'll just say Google. So this will be sort of in concert with what we put up here with the cite attribute. So we got this from google.com, and if you want the user to be able to know visually where did this come from, you would use the cite tag. So let's just save that, and we go, and now you can see that we have a very familiar block quote with a citation. Now you can style this citation. You can add a class, a CSS class, or multiple classes to this citation so that you can do the formatting. Maybe you want it to be centered, or you want it to be right aligned. You can do that through the CSS. But the initial style that you get is that it is italicized. So it comes with a little bit of styling just to set it off. And there's a little bit of margin here that sets it off from this paragraph. Now, just remember that if you were to put it outside the block quote, then it doesn't get the special styling of the block quote. So if you wanted to have that styling automatically, then you want to make sure that you come and you put it inside the block quote, and then it'll always take on the styling of sort of the container of this block quote. Now you can put lots of things inside of a block quote. It doesn't have to just be text. You can put images, you can put videos, you can put all kinds of things inside of here. It's just sort of a container that gives you this, it gives you this sort of set off feel from the rest of the site. But semantically, you want to use this as you're quoting someone from somewhere. So that's what a block quote is for. And we use block quotes when there's more than, typically when there's more than one sentence that you're quoting someone, you want to use a block quote. Now we also have another quoting element, and I'll show you that one. So let's get a new paragraph. And the other quoting element, let's say we want to do this section right here. We want to quote this because we've taken that line from somewhere or that portion of a sentence, and we want to make sure that we quote it instead of just making the text a different style. We want to make sure that the user knows this is a quotation. So we can use just a single Q, and then we need to close it off. So we go to the end of wherever our quote is, and we close off that Q. So all of this is our quotation. And when we hit save and refresh, you can see now that it automatically gives us some quotation marks. If we were to if we were to remove that, I didn't show you the paragraph by itself. So let's save that, and you can see now there's no quotation marks. So the browser is adding those quotation marks automatically. It's my understanding that most browsers, modern browsers, are going to do that, where they add the quotes, the quotation marks automatically. So now you can see they're in there. And this represents a single line, or let's say you just want to quote a small portion of a sentence or only one sentence. You would use, it's more appropriate to use the Q than the block quote. Now we can also cite, and so we can use an attribute as a citation. Use the same google.com. And now if someone were to go through the code, they'd be able to see, okay, this is cited from this particular website or this particular source. And then they would be able to travel to that source and go and see the quote themselves to verify. So remember that HTML was born out of scientists who were sharing their information and their academic papers around the world to each other, and they didn't want to have to mail it back and forth all the time. So they wanted a way that was secure, a way that was fast, and to be able to send their information to one another. And so HTML was a way that they were marking up their academic papers in order to share them with one another. And so a lot of the elements that we have, headings, paragraphs, block quotes, single quotes, that type of thing, citations, excuse me, those things are there because that was how they would write academic papers. If you've ever written an academic paper, you know that those are really key parts to be able to mark up the page and put the right headings, to give the right format and structure to the paper. So this is the way that they did it, and this is the way that we can also use this. So this might be a really nice a way to pull out a quote from somewhere, maybe even from the text. So if you had CSS, you could like really style this and have sort of a pull-out quote in the middle. You've seen that in magazines where it's like part of a quotation or a quote that's real big and maybe a different color. It would be appropriate to use a block quote in the HTML in order to show the screen reader, or for SEO purposes, to let them know this isn't a normal part of the text, this is a block quotation, maybe from the text, maybe from somewhere else. So you don't necessarily need to include this site. It works just the same if you don't. So you don't see any difference here. But if you do have excuse me, if you do have that citation and it is somewhere online, it's really nice for the user to be able to look and to see in the code, or for the screen reader to be able to read it aloud to someone to say, hey, this came from somewhere else. In one last thing you could also do, Well, we can just take this because that's where it goes. So if we actually wanted to send the user there and give them access directly to the quotation, then we could just simply put in a link, and now when the user clicks here, they can actually go to the citation, and then anything you want to put in here, you could say you could view the citation, and now when the person hovers over it, they get a little prompt and a little thing that says, oh, if I click here, that's going to allow me to go to the citation itself. So you can sort of supercharge this citation as well, to have some different elements that would help the user and thinking about, if I came across this element, what sorts of actions would I want to take? What would I want to know about this element? Would I want to be able to click it and go and see it for myself? Or would I be interested in reading the entire article? Something like that. And you could put that inside the title attribute of this anchor link. We haven't gone over title attributes, but if you look it up online as far as the different tags, you'll realize that there are multiple attributes that you can use for some of these general tags. They're not things that we use all the time, but sometimes we do in more advanced web development use things like that, where you're thinking about, what can I put here that helps the user to understand what they can do, what they're supposed to do, what's possible, what does this mean? That's sort of a big question in web development, because you don't always know what everything means, because we're sort of using some of these tags sometimes out of the context of the original, which is to write academic papers, but we're using those tags to do something else away from their original intention. So sometimes you have to put your new intention out there so that people can understand, okay, why is this here? What is it linking to? Why is it linking there? That sort of thing, if it's not totally obvious. All right, if you have any questions about the quote or the block quote elements, leave them down in the comments section below. If you've missed an episode, click on the link in the description to go to the playlist and just start with episode 1, or you can go back to the episodes that you missed. Again, this series is taking you from knowing nothing about web development all the way to having a fully developed personal profile page that you can put on any web host in the world. And I'll actually go through how to put those things onto a web host and things like that. We'll see how detailed everything gets, but my intention is to make it pretty detailed, that this is a course that you can take to get caught up to speed on the basics of web development so that you can actually create web pages for yourself. And then the creative part is sort of up to you, but having the tools and knowing how to use them and knowing how to get everything online is sort of step 1 of web development. And so in the next few episodes, we're going to start to cover more of the structure and putting the web page together. I think we have one more element that I want to cover, and then after that we'll get into how to structure overall the website so that it makes sense to robots, and it makes sense for SEO, and it makes sense if someone is looking at your code, what everything means. So meaning is sort of the next level of what we're going to do with the code. All right, I think that's it for this episode, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.